Alexander conquered the known world by the time he was just 30. 30. And Napoleon? He rose from absolute obscurity, literally starting with nothing, to eventually become Emperor of the French. Now, when we look back at history, it's so tempting to view these towering figures as, well, fundamentally different from us. We kind of just assume they were destined for greatness. But the truth, as we're going to map out in this explainer today, it is way more fascinating. Welcome to the architecture of the quiet transformation. Okay, let's dive right into this and bust a massive myth. Born winners versus built winners. For centuries, right, the narrative has leaned heavily on this idea of innate talent, some royal bloodline, or just plain sheer luck. But the reality? It's entirely on the other side. Those giants of history, they absolutely were not born winners. They were meticulously built. Greatness isn't some lucky lottery ticket you scratch off. It's a construction project. It takes blueprints, raw materials, and relentless, grinding labor. Which brings us directly to the core question of our entire blueprint today. How do you build an emperor? Seriously, think about that for a second. If greatness is actually constructed, what are the steps? If you wanted to build a legacy that reshapes the map or leaves a permanent mark on history, how exactly do you start pouring the concrete? What does that scaffolding actually look like? Phase 1, rule your own mind first. The foundation. Because look, before you can build upward, you always have to dig downward. So let's slow down for a sec and look all the way back to ancient Athens. To understand where winning starts out there in the world, we first have to figure out where it starts internally. And it starts right here. Socrates said winning starts with knowing yourself. Before any outward conquest, before you're leading teams or building empires, there has to be this deep inward journey. You literally cannot command a room, let alone a nation, if you don't understand your own internal mechanisms, your strengths, your triggers, your blind spots. Conquering the world, that begins with excavating yourself. Now let's move to and see how this builds into our next critical piece of wisdom. Plato expands directly on Socrates here, saying that before you rule anything else, you must rule your own mind. It's a direct progression. First, you know yourself. Then you rule yourself. Mental dominion is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for worldly power. Because let's face it, you can't impose order on your life or your work if your own mind is an absolute mess. And that brings us to a crystal clear definition of self-mastery, the ability to control one's own desires, impulses, and mind before attempting to lead others. This is the absolute bedrock of our architectural foundation. Think about it like a real building. If this foundation is cracked, if you just give in to every single impulse or lose your temper at every minor setback, the entire structure is going to collapse the second real pressure is applied. You've got to master yourself first. Phase 2. The forge of hardship, embracing conflict. Having a solid foundation is great, right? But now we need to bring in some heavy 19th century realism to stress test what we just built. We have to learn to actually embrace conflict instead of constantly running from it. We call this environment the forge. It's a brutal environment where intense heat and pressure transform raw, vulnerable materials into unbreakable assets. And I really want you to reframe your relationship with adversity right now. Hardships, failures, setbacks, they aren't roadblocks stopping your construction. They are literally the intense heat required to harden the steel of your character. This whole philosophy is perfectly captured right here. Nietzsche believed hardship isn't the enemy, it's the forge. Every setback is fuel if you let it be. This right here, this is the massive emotional turning point of our blueprint. Struggle is completely transformed into strength. When you actually adopt this mindset, a failure isn't a reason to quit anymore. It is quite literally the combustible material you toss into the furnace to make the fires burn even hotter. Phase 3. Modern tools, ancient wisdom. The scaffolding. Okay, so we've got our foundation of self-mastery and we've got our furnace to temper our resolve. But how do we actually do this every single day? We need to shift from abstract philosophy to concrete scaffolding. We've got 3 amazing modern tools mapped out here to operationalize that ancient discipline. First, deep work. This teaches us intense focus, the ability to just shut out a wildly noisy world and zero in on the task at hand. Second, atomic habits. This teaches us the incredible power of small, daily wins, reminding us that empires aren't built in a day, they're built brick by brick. And third, Ikigai. This teaches us alignment. And this brilliantly illustrates how Ikigai perfectly balances 2 crucial slices, what you love and what the world needs. It bridges the gap between your internal passion, that deep self-knowledge Socrates was talking about, and your actual external utility in the world. When you combine the intense focus of deep work, the compounding power of atomic habits, and the total alignment of Ikigai,
you have an absolutely unstoppable scaffolding for success. Phase 4. Discipline that built empires. The monument.
Once the foundation is poured, the materials are forged, and the scaffolding is up. What do you get? Let's speed the pace back up here and look at the historical proof of this exact blueprint in action. We've plotted 3 of history's most famous figures: Alexander, Caesar, and Napoleon. Now, these guys are separated by vast amounts of time. They lived in totally different eras, facing completely different geopolitical landscapes, but they are intimately, deeply connected by one shared trait: their flawless execution of extreme, unyielding discipline.
Just look at the specific rigors they put themselves through. Alexander didn't just rely on some raw, innate military instinct. No, he studied under Aristotle, literally the greatest philosopher of his time, sharpening his mind just as much as his sword. And Caesar, the guy was legendary for his time management. He never wasted an hour. He maximized every single waking moment to outmaneuver his rivals. Their immense advantages were not handed to them at birth. They were built through relentless intellectual and physical rigor. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by this single, genuinely shocking digit: 4. That is the exact number of hours Napoleon slept each night. Think about that. While his competitors, his generals, his enemies were resting, he was awake. He outworked absolutely everyone around him. He applied that intense heat and pressure to himself daily. It's a stunning reminder of the sheer volume of effort required to build a monument. Phase 5. Self-mastery repeated daily. The culmination. Which brings us to the culmination of our explainer today. We've mapped out the entire architecture, from the ancient ruins of Athens to the battlefields of Europe, right down to the habits on your own desk. And it all funnels down to one unified theory. Winning isn't luck. It is simply this multi-step process repeated every single day. Step 1, know yourself, to pour the foundation. Step 2, turn your struggles into fuel in the forge. Step 3, use modern tools to build your daily habits as scaffolding. And step 4, execute with the kind of ruthless discipline that actually leaves a monument. It is self-mastery, repeated daily. We've laid out the blueprint, but now, the heavy lifting is completely up to you. You can dive much deeper into this framework by checking out the source material from the Slow Scholar Society at the link provided. But before you go, I want to leave you with one final, vital question to ask yourself when you wake up tomorrow morning. Are you meticulously building your future, or are you just waiting around to be born a winner? Keep building.